David Cleandon.
Yeah, Mr Chair. Kia ora koutou. Mr Chair, I'd like to return to the theme of democracy that we've heard a bit about tonight. And in a perverse way, I was pleased to hear the Minister reject an SOP on the basis that he believed it would disenfranchise people in Auckland. I suspect, in fact, it might not have done that, but I am pleased to hear the Minister say he won't disenfranchise the people of Auckland completely, because after what happened to the electors in Canterbury region, there is considerable concern that, in fact, this may become a tool of the government to routinely disenfranchise whole sections of our society, taking away their right to vote for some 3 or more years. We heard a fairly vigorous and genuine defence of local democracy from the member for Botany. And again, that's a good thing. And I think the number I heard was some 700 people expressed the view that they ought to regain a name that was preferred by them. And I just wonder what form of selective democracy is at work here when 700 people can stimulate a ministerial SOP, but the expressed views of some 9,000 people in Our Auckland poll seem to have been overlooked in this. In that poll, some 96% of the 9,000 people who responded rejected the process and rejected the model that is being imposed on them. There were a series of questions, and I think the opposition to this bill in the least of those questions was in the mid to high 80s, and most of the opposition to this bill came from more than 90% of some 9,000 people. I think the number was 8,970. Those people took the trouble to fill in a form, most of them, put it in an envelope, post it. Not an onerous thing to do, but significantly more commitment shown than simply ticking a box responding to a phone survey, perhaps. The situation of the people in North Rodney, similarly. As I say, I needn't re-engage with the detail of that, but clearly there is a very selective form of democracy at work and being practised here. The question that's constantly being asked is, in whose interests is this bill being passed? In whose interests are we reforming Auckland governments and the structure of Auckland into the future? And as was pointed out earlier, there is no hidden agenda here. It's a very clear and patently obvious agenda, and one simply needs to go to the ACT Party website, the website of the party of the Minister for Local Government, and look at their policy on local government. Policy detail, and I quote from it, local government will be required to shed its commercial activity. In other words, privatise, dispose of anything that might be an income-generating activity. And what better mechanism than the CCOs to ensure that after this term of government has expired, in the event that we are have the return of this government, then all bets will be off. And these assets that the Auckland people have worked for, own outright now, and ought to continue to own, manage and control, will very much and very quickly be on the block, neatly packaged in CCOs, very much available for sale. The ACT policy goes on, the Minister's policy goes on to say roads and piped water will be supplied on a fully commercial basis. Now, I think the road-in lobby, the road-in industry might take some question with that. If indeed roads were put on a fully commercial basis, that might make some of our public transport, our rail systems, look significantly more profitable. The rail, as we know, is obliged to, or according to the right-wing ideology, is obliged to operate without subsidy, which does clearly penalise it in competition with very heavily subsidised road users. And in the Auckland instance, the transport CCO, if in fact we see such a beast created, would be in a very strong position to extract vast amounts of money from the taxpayers, from the ratepayers, if we were to commercialise our roads. Rather more serious is the notion of commercialising water. Water is not simply a commodity, it's a necessity of life. It is something which has divided Aucklanders routinely, and indeed in many parts of the country. One can always get a vigorous debate going in Auckland by simply uttering the words water pricing, water rates. Yeah, I think most right-thinking people, or sensible people should we say, would completely reject the notion of commercialising something which is an absolute essential to life, to make it a commodity to be bought, sold, traded, and from which somebody's deriving a profit. And I believe that should be resisted. Kia ora.